Hey guys, welcome to another episode of our Hono series together. Today we will be looking at unit testing, our API, and the main objective behind the lesson is essentially integrating our API with some unit testing. So, testing our endpoints, making sure that they run as expected. And what we'll be covering is we'll be covering one, unit testing. What that entails is ensuring our components or functions run as expected, catch any errors, test inputs and outputs of our functions. The tools we'll be using is Sinon.js, which is like a stubbing library, which is just a way for us to like mock and test our functions. Jest, which is one of the biggest testing libraries for JavaScript. Supertest, it's a way that we can test our HTTP request. So yeah, we're gonna do like a code walkthrough and where I'll just run you guys through some of the code snippets that we will be adding. And so the first task slash test we're going to add is going to be a tasks test. And the first thing we'll do is we're going to just import the code. So we import sign on, we import our service, and import our app, right? And again, sign on is used for stubbing. Stubbing just means just testing our functions or mock testing it. We need like a task service. So the service layer is basically where the business logic would be, sort of like the main core processes for our task endpoint. And then we have app. So app is just our Hono instance, which would basically just have our HTTP request, right? And then we would wrap them in test suites. So each test case sort of, you'll see the code has like a describe, which is just like the overall description of the main sort of like test we're going to be testing. So they could be like testing our API, and in this case, it's going to be task API with sign-on stubs, right? And then we have after each. So after each test case runs, we sort of can set like different parameters and stuff. So here we're just gonna like restore, or we're gonna just set all our stub methods so that it can just be set back to default, and then we can run the next test so that nothing sort of like continues, nothing, no function, and there's no like unwanted sort of changes. Describe again sort of groups it together, so it's like the main parent, the main name of the test case after each, ensures that after all the silent stubs run, they just get reset again to avoid side effects. So that's what the word I was looking for. And then we have some test cases. So the first test case would be we just want to fetch all tasks for a given user. And so this is how it's going to look. We will name it here. So it should return tasks for a given user. So this is just a function that calls the task service and calls the task get tasks by user ID method specifically. So that's a function that's going to just return tasks that belong to one user. And then we're going to resolve it. Once it resolves, we're going to just give it an example of what we expect the output to be. In this case, we have a ID, title, description, and a status, and user ID, which is basically like how our tasks look like, right? And so I've got some code written here. So this is just making a request to our tasks endpoint. So we want to test that, pass in the user ID of one, get the data. Once we have the data, we can check, okay, cool. What is the status code of the response that got back from the API? If it's a 200, we know that that's successful. And then we can also like test like the actual values that come back from our API as well. So this is just walking us through the code that I showed you guys now. The second test case we'll have is we're going to fetch all our tasks. So that's just basically should return all tasks when no user ID is provided. So fetch all tasks for everybody. So here what we're going to do again is we're going to stub, we're going to call the task service. Now we're going to fetch get all tasks. What that does is that actually resolves an object or an array of tasks, which now you will see in the same structure: ID, title, description, user ID, and status as well. And this will be like more than one task. So I just have two examples here, and we're just gonna have an example. The status should be 200, and we know we're good. And then again, the key concepts we'll be covering is stubbing. So stubbing, again, what that means is just allows us to replace a function's behavior with like a predefined response. Again, so like just testing, mock testing our functions, and then give it like what we expect the outcome to be, and then we're just stubbing. So this kind of is helpful because you don't actually test with your database. You just say, okay, cool. When I call this function, this is what I expect. And in a set, these are just like validating what we expect. For example, when the HTTP request status code is 200 or the body contains like certain values. And then there are like some life cycles. So like that's why we had the before each and stuff like that. So again, life cycle just helps to facilitate like when things stop and end and how you want to test them. And so yeah, we're going to look at improvements. So we can add more like assertions, so we can like test multiple things. Currently we're just testing the response status, but when we dive into the code, we'll be looking at different sort of like assertion types. So maybe like the values, what we get, what we expect to get back from the response, that sort of thing. And yeah, we can also check the stub calls. So we can just check that, for example, a method only gets called once, that sort of thing. We can also do like some error handling as well, so we can add like tests for each like error scenario and have like some invalid user IDs and make sure that it kind of fails. And then next steps from then onwards, we'll probably have a discussion, but we're going to be looking at maybe integrating the entire system, making it all like test worthy. But I'm thinking maybe we can like refactor some endpoints, make it into like a service layer, and then just leave it at that, and I can leave the the other things to you guys as well. So yeah, cool. So let's dive into the code. So the first thing we need to do is we need to install our dependencies, and so we can actually get the test going. So you have to install Jest. There's quite a few libraries. Jest. Let me scroll. So these are all dev dependencies. So you have to do something like this, and then you do Jest sign on. I'm actually looking at them here. I won't install them. I'm just showing you the packages you need. So JS, TS, JS, TS node, TS node. We're not using super test actually. JS types, add types, sign on, and then same thing for these two libraries here. So these are all dev dependencies. So we have to just run that. It's going to install it. We don't need to do it on our side because I've already added it. And then once you add this in, you have to like set up some configurations, right? So the first thing we need to do is have to create a js.config.ts file. So I've got some code here on my side. I'll just copy over. So for my js.config file, we'll do this. And this basically just configuring my JS. And then the next thing I'll do is I'll do just.setup.ts because here we have a just.ts. So that's for further setup. And here I also have some code here. I want to just import some stuff. Yeah. Environment variables, we load them here. And then this for DOM testing as well. So I'm going to just remove this and remove this. Cool. So once we have that, we can then create a test folder. So it's tests, and in here we can just give our test actually our name. So here we're gonna do tasks.test.ts. And then very important, in your package.json file, you have to add the test script. So you have to go under your script stack and do test, so that test, and then you assign it to Jest so that you can actually run your unit testing. So here we're gonna write some tests. So write some basic tests for the task service. I don't know if Copilot is on. Let's see. Okay, that's not the correct one. It's fine. Describe the service. Cool. So you've seen some of this code. I'll put my code here and I'll just explain it. So the first thing we're doing again, so the describe again sort of groups our testing. So we can do like tasks API with sign-on stubs. So we're going to like bed and test. So that again is sort of like the group, sort of like, yeah, the main test. And then in there we have like our test cases or our test suites. So here we have two test cases. The first one is should return tasks for a given user. Again, we sort of walked through this a little bit earlier. My battery is a little low, but it's fine. We walked through this a bit earlier, and so then the second thing we're going to do is we're going to just open this and see like how this actually works, what happens, stuff like that. So in this case, we are just running the code. Again, should return task for a given user. What we're doing here is basically we're going to call the task service again. We're going to call the method get tasks by user ID, which is here. So here I'll show you. I actually did some refactoring here. So we've got a task service which sort of encapsulates our task logic, business logic. Here we have get tasks by user ID, we have get all tasks, we have get task by ID. So we sort of group them together and put it in a service that is separate from our endpoint, and that just makes it easier for us to test. Um, so now that we're stubbing our function, this function, we can actually just resolve and just test what actually gets returned from this method or from this endpoint. So we know that when we ping get tasks by user ID, we should get an ID, a title, description, user ID, and a status as well. That should be our task that comes back. And then what I'll do here is I'm just testing, okay, cool. The response status that comes back is at 200. And then the data is basically the response that comes back um, from our API. So what we're doing here is we're testing, okay, cool. Is the data that we're getting from our API, is it this here, which is what we expect, because that's what we're giving it here. So we know that when this is the value, this is what we're going to expect. Or at least this is when that function returns this, that's going to be the data that comes back. So we're going to run this function and test it and see. So we're going to do npm test. And then this runs our test cases. Okay, actually failed. Why is this failing? Sorry. This is not saved, my bad. npm test. I don't know if that will work, but let's see. So yeah, just make sure you save your files as well. Okay, cool. So we have two tests that passed, and let's see. So should return task by given user. That's looking good. So let's change some logic to make it fail. So here we know that when we pass in the user ID to, we know that it should fail because we expect it to be 1 right here. It's already complaining here. Let's see. So yeah, it's already complaining, but let's assume it didn't complain, and then let's run our test case. And then it should break, right? I don't even know if it will run. I don't think it will run, but if it runs, it should break and tell us that it failed because we expected. So yeah, it's saying that we expected it to be 2. We expected it to be 1, received 1. Wait, which one is it? Sorry. This one here. Yeah, this is the one. We expected it to be 1, but we passed in 2. So let me go here. And then let me do this. 1. And then there was somewhere else here. The 1. Somewhere else is. This one is 2. And then we're gonna run through our other test, and then maybe we can write another unit test. Cool. So here it's passed. So should return all tasks when user ID is provided. Cool, that's fine. It's not provided. Sorry, my bad. That would okay. So when we just say get all tasks, we should just get this, which is fine. Again, if you sort of remove this and say, okay, cool. When I expect one task to come back, and then this we're giving it two here, it should also fail. So I'm going to just show you. We can write some more logic. We can write some logic for some other stuff as well. Here we go. That failed again because we told that we expected it to be two here, but then we gave it one from the resolved. But yeah, we can write other cases. Let's see what Copilot will give to us. It should return a single task by ID. Okay. Okay, it looked like it did it for me. So this one is should return a single task by ID. So we'll pass in task by ID, so one task ID, and it should give us that one. Again, same thing. I believe we are testing this function. Oh, we're not. Okay, that's user. Okay, that's fine. Okay, let's test this and see. So let's run this. So we should have three passing test cases. If this is all while 200, it should be exactly the same. And then we should have three. Okay, cool. It's fine. Again, we can play around with it. We can make it fail. Excuse me. We can make it fail. And let's make it two, for example. It should fail also. Laptop is crying. Did it pause? Did it fail? I'm gonna just pause it before my laptop dies. But yeah, that is the overall summary. Hope that was helpful. Okay, so I just resumed it because I paused and then got my laptop to work. So what we want to do is we want this to fail, right? So if we pause two here and then we go here and run this, it should fail, which is what I was doing to tell us that we expect it to be one, but it's two. So our tests, they are passing, they are failing, which is good. Um, so yeah, here we can basically write as many tests as we can. So here we can do like this is the one test case. We can have another file, for example, and call it users test.ts. And here you can imagine we'll do create tests for user service. So we can add it to do um, first create a user service with logic. So I won't add the logic now, but I'm just going to just add some high level comments and maybe something we can pick up later. I just wanted to test one sort of service that's working fine, and then we can obviously just use that as the baseline and then go back, change and update. But then moving forward, we're probably going to move on to um, I think just again upgrading our API, making it a bit more robust, maybe refactoring the code, but I'm looking at maybe doing some authentication, that sort of thing. So you can maybe let me know in the comments what if you would like us to refactor first, create services, user service, and test the user to be exactly the same as this. So I maybe just leave that as homework for you guys, and then you can just let me know. But yeah, looking forward to that. And cool. Thanks for joining. See you in the next episode.